Hello, friends, and welcome to Chas's Coaches Corner. Very excited to have some amazing coaches here, Mr. Brian Manuel and Cameron Martin, and of course, all of our other esteemed coaches as well. I would just like to have a chat about invitationals. In particular, what is they and how do you get to them and what good are they? Because there's a lot of questions surrounding that. So first, I'll have our resident wizards of wonder introduce themselves. Mr. Manuel, will you begin? And then Cameron, will you follow up? And we'll go ahead and just direct with some questions along the way.
Hi, I'm Brian Manuel. I'm the director of the Stanford Invitational, the chairman of the National Debate Coaches Association. I'm also the director of the Tournament of Champions and the director of University of Kentucky debate events, which include like the University of Kentucky season opener, digital series, college tournament, middle school TOC, and all the different events that fall into that header. I've been doing debate for approximately 25 years as a coach, and I'm thrilled to be here to talk to the coaches at CHASA.
Thank
And
you.
I'm Cameron.
Yay!
No, I've been a coach for the last 10 years myself. I was the director at LCC for the past 5 years. I was assistant coach at Helix High School, plus a couple other high schools, Smattern before that. So as Brian was talking about, a lot of his experience on the collegiate end as well as on the high school end, all my stuff has been in the high school side. I was also the director of the La Costa Canyon Winter Classic, a little bit of a staple in Southern California for the last 5-ish years. And this year I'm stepping back as assistant coach. And my former assistant coach, Lisa Nadi, is going to be our head coach and running that tournament herself now. So I'll be talking as someone who's kind of in the past, kind of in the middle, and something exciting moving forward.
Perfect. Well, I think I'll just segue there for a moment. Cameron, how do you choose what tournaments to go to besides the fact you host one?
A whole lot of that is I always try to feel the pulse of what my students want, right? Like, for example, a great balance that our team always goes back and forth with is Berkeley versus Harvard. That President's Day weekend is a huge weekend, and it's always that game of like, what kind of competition do you want to go to? Like, those are arguably some of the biggest competitions in the entire country when it comes to high school teams. But you take a look at, well, who would I be bringing to this tournament, right? Like, let me know if I start rambling at all. I can tie it all back. But a big part of it is, first finances, right? Like flying out to Harvard will be more expensive than flying to Berkeley. So the couple of times we've gone to Harvard, partially it's just because like those years in which you're really looking at gamesmanship, your final round at Harvard will often be just as beautiful, if not more difficult, than your final round at NSDA Nationals. Like the things that you get to see at Harvard are absolutely incredible every year. And then there's some pros and cons that come with that, right? So like, Berkeley, I always take my team and we just have the best time. It's a feel good, fun time. You have an amazing final round still. It's a great experience, but it's a much like the purpose of the tournament tends to be a lot chiller, a lot more communal, a whole lot more like, hey, we get to bring novices and have a good time. Harvard, it's like, don't fall in the snow, be serious, take notes in every round. We paid like 6 flight tickets for one student to get here, so it's you have to balance so much when it comes to just choosing one tournament. So for me, when I got started, I started really small. When I was an assistant coach at Helix, we did like 2 invitationals a year. If we were lucky, we did like Jack Howe, state, because Helix even considered state an invitational at the time. So you just start with where your kids are at, the level of competition you want for your team, and obviously how much money that you're able to put into this. And later, when we get into that fundraising part, I'll give my 2 cents there as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I too did the 2 semesters when I had or 2 tournaments when I had small teams, one fall, one spring. One was to get your feet wet. The other was to get you ready for qualifiers. So yeah, there's definitely purpose. Mr. Manuel, do you have thoughts about that too?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Cameron said. I think it goes with like programmatic goals. So when I was a competitor for Scranton High School in Pennsylvania, we focused a lot on like the CFL. So we were a big CFL school. As a result, we went to like all the CFL practice tournaments. Those were a requirement. When I coached for Cathedral Prep in Erie, Father Hahn was really big into like, CFL, NSDA, and state. And he used to say, like, I know the students, required to be a TOC champion. They all wanted to go to the TOC. The kids had to drive to it, but he was like, the requirements are you must attend the state tournament, you must attend the CFL Nationals or the Catholic Forensic League Nationals, and you have to try to qualify for the NSDA qualifier. And if you qualify, you have to go, because those were programmatic goals, even though the students had individual goals. Now that I'm, when I was coaching at Edgemont had been, historically a TOC level school that focused on qualifying to the TOC every year. And that was, a little bit of the way our schedule works. It would conflicted with like Regents in New York City at times, conflicts with the NSDA National Tournament. The New York State Forensic League, for a number of various reasons, did not have policy debate for a long time. So the result was like we didn't have like a policy debate championship to aspire to. So like the TOC became like their driving force. So a lot of the other leagues weren't really a thing. So I think programmatic goals, super important. Then agree with Cameron again, finances, obviously now given inflation and everything that's happening, finances are at the top of everyone's mind in terms of looking at plane tickets, hotels, gas, rental cars, vans, buses, etc. A school I was just with, the University of Kentucky, before the pandemic, was paying 50% less for their buses than they are now when they went to the Wake Forest tournament. So, a bus that costs, maybe a couple $1,000s to take your team now costs several $1,000s. We're talking, $7,000-$8,000 compared to like 2,500. So a lot of those things come into play. And then, I think once you hit those two things, then, you can sort of become like a boutique program if you want. But I think boutique programs are kind of, the lesser experience. Like my experience has always been sort of with full service programs. So that's kind of what I aim to speak about and kind of aim to move toward. They've been full service speech and debate, and like full service debate in terms of offering parliamentary policy, public forum, and Lincoln Douglas. But I do think like once you hit a couple of those, you can go to tournaments. And lastly, I agree with Cameron when he talks about the experiences flying across the country. I'm on the East Coast, flying to Cal comes with the same issues that he said flying to Harvard. It's like, once you spend, per kid, $2,000, $2,500, when you add all that stuff in, what that experience gets and what you're demanding out of that experience elevates based on the amount of money that's coming out of parents' pockets, school pockets, fundraising pockets, alumni pockets, whatever the case may be, however you get your money. And then it means more what you have to do with those compared to like, practicing at a more regional tournament that's like national in scope.
That makes total sense. Hi, Justin. Welcome. So excited to have you. Justin is one of the directors of the Martin Luther King tournament up in James Logan High School. So hello, friend. How are you? So excited to have you. We're talking about invitationals. What are they and why go? How do you choose which ones to go to? And we're just kind of giving some background. So if you want to introduce yourself and your tournament and talk about your stuff, I'd love to hear.
Sure. Sorry for being late. My name is Justin Krupp. I am a director of forensics at James Logan High School, which is in the East Bay. It's a suburb of Oakland, California. We're all from California. So anyways, but yeah, we also host the Martin Luther King Jr. Invitational every year here at our school at Logan. And so this year we'll be back in person. For the first time in a couple of years. So hopefully we see a lot of friends.
Close the door.
Yes. And yeah, James Logan is I think Brian was talking about a full service program. Like James Logan does both speech and debate. And we try to compete in as many of the CHASA events as we possibly can. Definitely all of the CHASA speech events and as many as the debate events as we can compete in. We'll try. And as you all know, it's incredibly difficult to be able to host a program that offers every event because coaching is a very specific expertise, and we're a public Title I school that doesn't have any support or funding from our district or our school at all. And so we have to do fundraising for all of that. And so we just try to do our best. I am not alone though. I do have a co-director. His name is Jesse, who does the debate side and I do the speech side, at least for this next year. And then we're both alum of James Logan. So we competed for the program under Dr. Tommy Lindsay. We learned everything that we knew from him. He mentored us as student teachers and when we were getting our teaching credentials, and then we took over the program after he retired. And so have been doing our thing ever since the last 6-7 years. But yeah, that's the intro.
That's amazing. I do think it's a natural segue. I mean, thank you for being here, by the way. I'm so excited. Yeah, Cameron, go.
Can I just hype him up real quick?
Yeah.
And say, like, the MLK tournament was the first invitational I ever went to a student, first invitational I ever took students to back in my day. And boy, howdy, is it always a good time. Again, like I was talking about with the Harvard tournament, you always see amazing final rounds. What I love at MLK is it feels like Harvard of the West Coast. You just see incredible, especially interps. Like you'll see something in a final round at their tournament that you'll just never see anywhere else ever again for whatever reason that is. And you just build it in your head. So if you want to see some amazing interps, strongly recommend his tournament.
Yeah, I think all the directors that are in this picture at the moment are that. MLK was my favorite tournament to go to. I thought the minute Mr. Lindsay talked to me, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I was so excited. And then when kids make it to the final stage of those tournaments, you feel so accomplished. I could have died and gone to heaven. Same thing with Stanford and getting kids in the debate there, and just being on in those spaces of great, whether that is current coaching, past coaching, students competing. Like, it's good to have good competition. But how do you pay to get there? What are some of the fundraising ways that you guys function? I mean, selling kidneys is probably not the best way for our coaches to have longevity. So what are some thoughts that you have for bringing in the funds? Anyone can answer. Go for it, Justin.
Oh, okay. So fundraising is like always so hard, and we have a pretty large program comparatively. So we have about like 130 members on our team. And we're privileged and blessed to be able to offer it as a class, which I know not every school is able to have that. So we do have time like in the class period to talk about fundraising and all of those things. We see our kids every day, so that's a good thing. But one big thing is hosting tournaments, and so the MLK tournament is our our big fundraiser during the school year, and that definitely helps support our second semester or second half of the season run, especially if we have students that qualify to state or nationals and we're having to travel. And first semester, we're really supported by our fireworks booth fundraiser. And so in our city, they allow safe and sane fireworks. And so we, nonprofits are allowed to have a booth. And so we created our own nonprofit to support our team. And we are able to have a booth and we sell fireworks and we get to keep a percentage of the profit. It's the worst part of my job, I will say, because it's 4 to 5 days of 24 hours selling fireworks to people that want to celebrate the holiday. And so but it's worth it because it brings in lots and lots of fundraising opportunities for our kids. And so I would say like 90% of my stress in this job that I do is fundraising. And I do a lot of grant writing. I'm not a grant writer by trade. I get declined by, I would say, like 80% of grants because nobody wants to fund a public education institution. All of them think that districts should be funding that, but they don't realize like we're not getting funding for it. And so I spend a lot of time submitting grants. We do like the regular food nights as much as we can. We do an annual showcase where we'll do community donations for people to come and see our students before the state tournament, for example. So they can be like, bid them well, for nationals, or bid them well before the state tournament or something, come and see, and like we'll take donations at the door for that type of stuff. And then our alumni. I think Dr. Lindsay, and you all know him, can attest to this. Like, he was an amazing force for a lot of people. Like, a lot of Logan alumni are currently in CHSA as coaches across the state. And so something about him really connected with all of the individuals that he had in his class. And so we're blessed to have somebody like that to be able to help us reach out to our alumni. We do alumni campaigns, and our alumni, that are successful, have gone on and able to afford it, can donate back to us. So we do 2 alumni campaigns every year, one during Giving Tuesday, which is I think the first Tuesday of December, and then one in preparation for nationals to help us support to go to nationals.
Those are great ideas. I know with our showcase, we do a silent auction where we auction off like vacations, and we call vacation rentals and Airbnbs and ask them if they would donate a week or if they donate a couple days, and we get those to auction off, which is a good way to supplement, like have the raffle and the showcase. That's a great idea. Cameron or Brian, do you guys have ideas for fundraising as well?
Yeah, one of the big things, if you don't mind, I kind of go in reverse on this. A lot of teams that are instantly going to go into, like the high school I went to, Mount Miguel, was SC as low socioeconomically disadvantaged as possible, right? We were very much at the bottom of that, and now we work at La Costa Canyon in Carlsbad. Take that as you need to. So there was a whole lot of when I took over this team, there was an expectation that students paid $300 to be on the team. To literally, that included nothing. That was what you get to write on your resume, that you were on the team for $300, and then they paid per tournament. And it was nothing tournaments got to charge what the tournaments got to charge to be able to run the tournaments. I totally get that. But then it became at my team and some other teams that we assume wealth, they'll end up charging students for it, thinking, oh, well, these students can afford it. Their parents have money. You don't know that. I want to say that very cleanly and very as big as possible. I have several students who I've taken to nationals that they would not have even been on the team if they had ever had to pay for it. And you don't know until you know. And sometimes you'll never know. So if you just assume, okay, I fundraise, because fundraising is the worst part. It is terrible, just like Justin said. It is hard and it is awkward because begging people for money, even for good reason, is uncomfortable. We are in our please, please, please phase for our Winter Classic right now because we love to provide as much food as possible for our tournament. We even this year plan on having some to-go boxes. Some teams can take some stuff home to the hotel because there's just not enough time to grab dinner, or some kids just won't eat at tournaments because they can't afford it. It was actually Angel's idea a few years ago. She recommended our tournament start doing free meals at our tournament. All of this is to say, I know I'm getting off track. I'm good at it. It's a gift. Is when it comes to funding teams, try to get creative. So our stuff, we've been asking any hotel or any restaurant in the area, just like Justin said, the amount of no's you get when asking for stuff sucks. And we'll ask 100 restaurants for donations. Last time we did an in-person tournament, we asked 139 restaurants for donations. We had 23 yeses. But those 3 yeses gave us food all 3 of those days. And now that was less our team had to pay to put on this tournament, more money we made from this tournament. And I'm actually also pretty proud that our tournament doesn't charge insane prices. We charge what we can. I think we're pretty fair, and we've always done waivers for any team who asks. So for us to be able to fund, because now my students don't pay a dime. And 90% of my students could pay for that trip to Harvard. None of my students will ever have to. I take Greg Osborne and Thomas Gomes of Mount Miguel's approaches, and they say, if you can't afford it, if any of your students can't afford to go that want to go, none of your students are going. We lean into elitism a little bit for us. So we got to do what we can to support everyone, regardless of how much they're making at home. So a lot of the fundraising is get donations wherever you can. You'd be shocked how many people do want to say, oh yeah, I support speech and debate. There's so much prestige attached to the name of our activity that people want to support it. You want to be smart with how you're spending money at tournaments. Sometimes as a coach, I like to pick the hotels that'll give me the most points, but then there's another hotel that would have been $30 less a night for a hotel room. So now I just saved $1,000 at a tournament. Hustle where you can, because it's not just about how much money you make, it's how much you save. Because our Winter Classic does the vast majority of how much we spend throughout the entire year, because we budget, we hustle. So try to think about that on top of how you're going to get money. Don't think, oh, we're making money, so now let's go spend more money. If you play the game that you can only afford one tournament and you hustle it and now you can go to 3, awesome. It's better than planning to go to 3 when you don't have that money. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I love that idea. And to tap onto that, I know that we had parents who didn't have finances, but their job sent them all over the place. So they had air miles. So we started asking for the donations of air miles. Then we could go to nationals on those. If you get creative with what you ask your parents for, sometimes there's an availability to do things differently. And also, if you're asking some of the big companies that your parents may work for in November and in February, I think it is, they do matching funds. So we've had parents come together in groups and say, like, I'll give $20 until they get to $500, and then the company will match that, and then the parent who works for that company submits it so that they can have matching funds in return, which is a good way to kind of do that too. Welcome to Roy. Nice to have you joining us. Thank you. Brian, do you have any suggestions for funding as well?
Yeah, I mean, on top of everything everyone else said, I mean, I've been a part of programs that have done like Krispy Kreme fundraisers, hoagie sales, etc. I've also run a tournament for my alma mater in Scranton. I host a tournament now up in New York for a brand new program that started only 5 or 6 years ago, the Mamaroneck High School program, and that helps fund like a significant portion of their program. But one of the things I'd add in is the idea that some of the tier 2 and tier 3 colleges and universities that are in your area are like perfect places to go to recruit or to go for fundraising, because one is that you can always help them like set up a table at your tournament. So when I was in Scranton, I used to go to the University of Scranton, Lackawanna College, Misericordia, Wilkes, University of Scranton, and Marywood, and we'd always ask them to set up a table. They'd bring a recruiter, and then they'd always kind of like donate $500,000, and they look at it as just like their ability to like recruit students, especially when you have students from several areas around them, plus maybe out of state students, etc. And then, over time, I started collecting some data from them, and I found that like at least, 5 or 10 kids from the tournament would apply to those schools. And like, if they get one kid to go to that school, it like pays off 100 times over for them. So like their $500 investment to get, a tuition student from out of state to come to their school for 4 years, I mean, that well pays off. And I think thinking through some of those things help. And also I've like partnered with institutions like the University of Pittsburgh to host a round robin, and they donated money to help offset those costs. So then the money that you bring in on certain events then can go back towards your program. So I think thinking through beyond everything everyone else has said about working with local vendors and things like that, because I agree with Justin and Cameron that doing the fundraising on top of being a full-time coach and being a tournament director and being a teacher and all those different things and wearing all the different hats is difficult. But, sometimes if you get one pathway, you think of something else, like a couple emails that allow you to write one really good email and then cover it over and send it to a bunch of different people. And then, like Cameron said, if you send it to 140 places and, only 25 of them say yes. Well, if you think about it in terms of like 25, $100 donations, well, $2,500 is better than zero if you send it for one email 140 times. And we probably send 1,500 emails a year as tournament administrators and teachers and things like that. So, yeah, just adding that on top of everything else that's been said, because I've been a part of a program that's done all the things they've said as well. So I don't want to just be redundant.
No, you're great. And Angel, I see your hand. Go ahead, by all means.
Yeah, I had a question for everybody. So one thing that I know each of you has done at one point or another, because I've heard about it from coaches, is what happens if I have a low income team, that maybe wants to attend but can't afford the full cost at the Invitational. I know you all have done different kinds of waivers or trade outs for judges. I guess my question would be, what would be your advice to a coach who goes, we want to go, we can't afford the full price. What steps should they take? How should they approach the tournament director? And maybe what sort of compromise, if we can't do a full fee waiver, what are some other options or things that you think that they could reasonably ask for that wouldn't be a tremendous burden on the tournament?
I could jump in first. So at the Stanford Invitational, we have an equity and access program that we provide 100% fee waivers for all the UDLs in the area. We've done it with full service Title I programs to some extent, depending on their requests. But we've gone above and beyond to kind of use and allow for waivers for anyone who really can't afford it. I don't think we've ever turned anyone away from the Stanford Invitational over the past decade that I've been running it, for anyone there's been an issue with fees getting there. So I think number one is just kind of like ask. And I try to tell that to everyone. I think like a simple email to a tournament director just saying, here's the situation we're in, what can we do? The second part of that, I think, is like, what could offer service to the program or service to the tournament that you can offer. So, a lot of regards, it's like, I can offer 3 additional rounds of debate, or I can bring 2 additional parents to judge in speech or judge in public forum or something like that. Well, those always contribute because that might offset the ability of having to hire 2 people full time, which now means that you can use those funds and move them around. So always think through kind of like, do you meet one of the metrics that kind of exist in a program? And then second, can you offer some type of service to what's going on? Like I can help assist with checking rooms, especially at some of these very large invitationals, things like that, that all matters. At the University of Kentucky, we have the TOC fund that we've, we raise money for from some of our alumni and then also TOC alumni. We try to help use that to kind of offset some of the costs. I think moving into like the new post-pandemic world, I think some of the things people are thinking about is like I get a lot of requests every year when we're at Stanford, also when we're at for the University of Kentucky, people asking for like, will you pay for like travel, things like that. I think those requests are a little bit more difficult. It's very hard to offer, especially for a public institution like Kentucky and then a student organization like Stanford, to offer these like full 100% waivers when it comes to like airfare, rental, food, things like that. So I think you have to think about what your ask is going to be and who you're asking. If you're asking a national organization or sometimes a nonprofit that exists like on its own or a standalone, it's a lot easier than some of those requests that have happened. But yeah, I mean, those are the 2 routes. I mean, the local tournaments I run, like the New York Fall Face-Off, the Electric City Debates when I was at Scranton, a lot of times that was just like a service for fee change. Like I would judge extra rounds or I would help in a tab room or I would do this and it'd be a swap because it's like, both of them are public schools and it's just money coming into one. It's like, well, if we give you a fee waiver for your team to come, it probably means we need a fee waiver at your tournament. And I've seen that happen too, where, I know a lot of big schools, if you have kind of reciprocal size, you sort of swap. Like the Lexington team sometimes has swapped with the Mamaroneck team and been like, well, we're going to bring 10 entries to your tournament. You're bringing 10 entries to our tournament. We'll just like fee waiver each of them and swap those out. So now that's a tournament each they're going to get plus their home tournament. So it's 2 tournaments and that kind of like evens things out. So I think you can speak to the community around you and kind of say like, what does the size of your squad look like? And how can we interact with some of those programs, especially when you're talking about like a local statewide event, and just kind of say like, we have a reciprocal size squad. So like, we'll give you your entries and we'll take your entries off and we'll just make that a 1-for-1. Now you just have to get there and you kind of resolve the question of being able to compete.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. Cameron, Justin?
I think Brian really covered a lot of what I think I would have said. I definitely think that as speech and debate coaches and educators, we sometimes feel like we're on an island and we feel like, no one gets it because we're usually the only people that are doing that at that role at our institutions. And so it's often we're so used to not asking for help and we're so used to not collaborating. And I think my biggest thing is to work with to like really get to know the people in the community in the speech and debate world, so they have a face to a name when they see your email. I think that helps a lot. I work with great people like Kimberly at GGSA, and we get to hang out like multiple weekends a year, and so if I know that if my team needed something, Kimberly would totally help me out with it. And if her team needed something, like I would totally like do whatever I needed to. And so getting involved with the coaches really does help. I know a lot of coaches feel like isolated. They don't talk, they don't connect, get really competitive for whatever reason, obviously, like but we got to remember that we're all in it for the kids and we're all here because we want to do right by children, not just our own, but all kids. And so I think that really helps. Being a service, I think, to reiterate what Brian said, to the tournament is really helpful. Like if you bring extra judges or just volunteering your time. I know a lot of people do that at our MLK tournament is they help run tab. They work in the judge's house. Reaching out to the tournament with a tournament hotel to see like if they have extra discounts or comp rooms or something that sometimes like your friends can throw you if you can stay there. you know, if you have a few kids attending the tournament, can help. But I think everything that Brian kind of mentioned is really helpful. A lot of invitationals, a lot of tournaments don't really advertise their fee waivers, and so you do have to ask. I think there's few that with the equity committees and movement happening in speech and debate, like it is being more, you know, posted, where there's like a application and stuff that people can fill out. But you know, most invitationals, local invitationals, smaller invitationals, usually don't have those things posted, but they probably have a policy, and it's just asking. And they probably don't post it for a reason. They don't want people to ask, right? Because they want they want to raise money too. But you know, I'll be one of the people that's always asking. Angelique will tell you, I ask for so many things all the time before we get to state. Like, I need answers for all of these things. How can you help me? So, love you for it. But yeah.
And I have very, very little to add. I'll just add, like, be a good person. Like, not to me, but people in general. Like, don't be a jerk, because good people get good things. And if you're someone who is a jerk all the time, because let's be real, there's just, you know, people whose names in the community cause fear. But they're the ones who, when they ask you for something, you go like, why are you kind when you want something? But if you're someone who is constantly kind, constantly helpful, and trying to do good for others, like Justin said, like if you're putting that out there, people give that back tenfold. Like, I am terrible at registering. I'm just bad at it. So when I like screwed up registration, screwed up hotels, screwed up all this stuff, even for state, I screwed up so many times, and they're so nice. But I always get forgiven because, you know, I try to be decent to others. And you'd be shocked at how far that goes, even in an activity that we like to think is as biased and kind of clean cut cold. But like, what you're willing to do for others very often will come back to you. And, you know, if you want to come to Winter Classic, we'll totally like waive your fees. We got rooms this year. Come hang out.
I definitely want to echo that. I coach now at an independent school that has a giant, like, I get a budget for my school, so I don't worry about the fundraising part. But my first job was at a public school, and I definitely like reached out to our local invitational, like, I have 3 kids, what can I do? Or can I just come watch? I think that's always a good step if you've got a local invitational. Just ask to bring your kids. Like, is it cool if I bring my kids and they watch rounds? Is it cool if I figure this out? Is it cool if I just talk to people? That was my first kind of entry into meeting other coaches in my area and making friendships that have gotten me into tab rooms and other things, to kind of make sure that you are useful. I did that for my first state tournament. My league was hosting. I couldn't afford to pay $300 to bring food. So I said, I can bring my person. And I said, and like, I was like, Nermeen, I bring myself. What would you like me to do? And I ran to Staples like 3 times that weekend buying printer cartridges because we kept using them, and they didn't arrive at the tournament host. So it's like, I ran around doing that. I judged some rounds, and that was my contribution rather than bringing food.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely factual. You guys have got really good answers and thoughts. I guess I'd like to know some of your travel tips and theories. I joke about Bakersfield, and Angel knows Bakersfield, but so I made a really poor choice of where to get a hotel one time. And I learned that indoor hallways are very valuable to me. Do you have travel tips that you care to share about how to get your teams places, or what you do, or any intentional acts that when you do travel that you use for team bonding or for awareness? And just before we go there and you're thinking for a moment, I do want,
You muted yourself.
just kidding, want to put out into the ether and into the chat this new fundraiser that I just found that I love. And it's kind of cool. It's called Got Sneakers. And we are hosting our 2 December tournaments, and we're having every league bring their extra sneakers. Got Sneakers is an eco-friendly process that just literally recycles soles. And I thought it was kind of cool, like have a sole, get rid of a sole kind of thing. My kids' swim team did it. We made about $3 grand on 400 pairs of shoes. They pay you by the shoe. They send you the bags. They're prepaid to send back. All you got to do is give them your stinky sneakers. It's kind of a cool thing. I know that each tournament, like our November tournaments, we've done canned food drives to help out the community. This is kind of another way. We're doing the Got Sneakers at our league tournaments for league funding to make sure that we can do a food insecurity program for our students, so that everybody is kind of on the same place. And I feel like it's taking steps in the right direction. See where I'm going. I love info. Okay, so I'll stop talking and you can tell me, what do you do for tips for travel, friends?
I can go first, I guess.
Please.
So I've, one big thing I do all the time is just kind of like pick a hotel brand. I know this probably goes against something like Cameron was talking about before, where it's like sometimes picking a hotel brand is not always the ability to be able to afford those hotel brands or whatever. But I do think there's a number of benefits that come from it. One is just you get very used to like getting into a booking cycle. So for example, like I travel everywhere with Marriott. That was pre-pandemic for the last, 12 or 13 years. And I just get used to it. It helps me know like kind of like how to navigate the Marriott site, how to navigate Marriott customer support, how to know when to get rates, how to use certain rates to get things done. So for example, they have like extended stay rates that happen if you have to stay somewhere like over 5 nights, but you have to book them like at least a month out and things like that. So that's one of the things, like pick a brand because it gives you brand loyalty, learn their system, but also you get all the benefits from being a part of that brand. So you get, early check-in if you're flying across the country, you get late checkout on days you might have a late flight, or you want to have people that are in the tournament late that are competing at like a hotel, and you want to make sure that you have a space for your bus driver. You want to be able to make sure that your, kids aren't sitting around all day long. It allows you to sometimes get free breakfast. It helps you with the just flexibility. It's just the idea of like when you go somewhere, brand loyalty allows you to kind of like get taken care of a little bit better. Sometimes it gives you free Wi-Fi in the rooms that you don't necessarily get, even though it's 2022 and should be free at all the hotels you go to. And so that does work in that way. The second tip on the bank on that is to like try to do your booking like in bunches. It's easier to cancel than it is to pick up rooms. And I'm sure we've all been there where we forgot to book our hotel rooms for a place, or we need to add hotel rooms on for that extra set of kids because we don't want to commit ourselves early. But it's always better to book early. And I always book tournaments like in bunches. So the summer, usually there's always like a set of nights, usually in the summer, where I like sit on my front porch and I have my laptop with me and I'll just like crank through a first semester, second semester set of tournaments, because I just like look to see what the rates are. And sometimes you'll get like amazing rates, 8 or 9 months out from a tournament. Travel tip to anybody who comes to like the Tournament of Champions on a yearly basis. If you book your hotel rooms in like May or June of the previous year, you'll always get like a better rate, because for whatever reason, the hotels like don't catch up to put in like blockers for certain weekends. So you can always sometimes get a significantly better rate than if you were to wait till like September, October, November, December, etc. The same goes for like the Harvard tournament, the Cal tournament, these big monster tournaments that you're always going to be like competing for space at. So that's always like number one. Same kind of provides for like airfare. Again, brand loyalty is super important, but more importantly, how you book your airfare and when you book it is, people I don't think understand, is the idea that there are like buckets of seats and buckets of time when people can book these things. So for example, 30 days out is like the last chance that you're going to get any kind of like reasonable fare bucket. Once you're 30 days or closer to a debate tournament, not a debate or any event, the ticket prices like jump up astronomically. So like day 31 to day 29 could see a $200 or $300 difference. But shockingly, from day like 46 out to like almost 365, the rates will stay pretty static. So like booking it, like people are always like, book your airfare a year in advance. It like helps. That doesn't necessarily, is not always the best way, because that fare will probably be relatively static for the next 250 days until you start getting into that like, 45 to 90-day window. But again, loyalty works because you get to jump the line, you get a customer service support agent. If there's flights being canceled, which like, right now in airport chaos that happens all the time, you get free baggage sometimes with your stuff. You might get lounge access. You get preferred seating, which is huge, where you're not stuck, where people say, saw someone say, never go to Spirit Airlines. It's like, yeah, if you have to like not wait to get your seat at the end, etc. A lot of that happens. Like, for example, like brand loyalty, because we fly American with Edgemont all the time. When I was with Edgemont, there was a time where we were flying to the Emory tournament and we got to Charlotte because we had to do LaGuardia to Charlotte, Charlotte to Atlanta. Well, and we would have missed our connecting flight, but because we had so many people and I like had such high status in America, and they basically like announced when we landed in Charlotte, like we have to leave the plane first to go catch our connecting flight. And they let us all get off and they had it escorted over to our next flight. So it is nice, and very limited instances, it does help you out, like even beyond what you think the scope of status is. But, I think the main important thing is like when you book anything, try to book it in bunches. Like I know, trust me, as someone who's done like 35, 40 events in a year before, it's hard to keep track of all of it. But if you try to book in bunches at one time, knowing that canceling is easier than trying to pick things up at the end, it helps a huge thing. And the last tip I'll give for flying, if people have big teams, and this is a tip I got from someone that I used to work with, a colleague of mine, Bruce Miller from up in New Hampshire, but he used to book a year in advance group booking, because group booking with like 95% of the airlines, if you know you're always going to have a set of students, like 6, 8, 10 students are going to go to a tournament, you don't have to put your names in advance. So if you can get a good rate a year out, he just constantly books the same. Like I always know I'm going to have 6 students to go to the Glenbrooks, or always going to have 6 students to go to the Cal tournament. Well, book your 6 or 10 in a book grouping, and whatever the names are next year, you could put those names in. You could also change names on group reservations. You can't change names on an individual ticket when you buy it within a certain window. So that's just something to kind of think about when you're going, is like booking group reservations might be a little bit higher rate at the time you book, because they book you at like the highest class of flight that there's a seat available in. So if you look online and you see that there's a $210 ticket or $175 ticket, and you have 10 people going, well, if you try to book 10 tickets at one time and there's only 8 seats in that bucket, you're going to pay $400 for all your tickets, because they're going to put you all in the same bucket or class of seating. But if you do it with the group booking, yeah, you might pay a little bit of bump. You might pay, an extra $50, but know the flexibility you have when students cancel on you, changing names, doing a little bit of flexibility, adding an adult at the end rather than a student because you needed a chaperone. It provides you a little bit of extra flexibility. And then I guess one last additional tip to flying, which I don't know applies to everyone, because public school teachers and private school teachers, et cetera, but like having branded credit cards do provide like extra excessive, a lot of cancellation insurance, a lot of primary car rental insurance it offers you. So you don't have to like use your own or use the schools or pay for the additional like LWS insurance. But I know a lot of schools like don't allow people to use their personal credit cards. But if your school has a school-based credit card, I would still suggest your school to look into like trying to use a school-based business credit card that offers some of the tangible benefits that can help you when traveling, especially like primary insurance and trip cancellation and trip interruption insurance, stuff like that, because that only helps them in the long run, and benefits you in like the short term with everything that you're doing in terms of your booking and stuff like that. So those are just several tips that I know from just my experience doing things to kind of help people approaching these like very costly trips, and kind of get you in the right space. But I do think like booking in batches is like the number one thing, because if not, it always falls off your calendar and then you forget about it and you're like, oh man, I got to find hotel rooms, and then they're like always more expensive and you're like scrambling, and it's always like a headache and anxiety builds up, and I know no one wants that.
That was so informative. I love it. Thank you, Cameron. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely stealing so many of those ideas. While you were talking, I sent an email to start getting stuff done on that. That was awesome. I have nothing to add when it comes to like actual travel stuff like that. That was amazing. But what I will highly recommend for all my lovely public school teachers and private school teachers and everything in between, know the rules. Some of us have had to run and gun and do some things, we weren't proud of because we needed to get kids to tournaments or whatever, but know what you're doing. Because we always say that ask for forgiveness, not permission. That's how you lose your job. Like people are going to be a lot less kind when you're taking kids on a bus and you don't have the right kind of bus, or that bus isn't covered, or, oh no, it's okay. The kids said they could ride with a friend. That doesn't matter. They are on a field trip and that car crashes on you. I don't mean to be doom, gloom, scary about it, but we all are convinced it'll never happen to us. And then it happens to one of us. It's why you get car insurance, right? You hope you'll never get in an accident, and maybe you never will, but you need it just in case. So know your stuff. My senior year state tournament, I dislocated my knee at the state dance because I got on stage at the dinner dance. It was stupid, but I did it. And I have the awkwardest story of my coach who wouldn't tell me we couldn't go to the hospital because he forgot our permission slip stuff. So he didn't have my insurance paperwork that said we can go. So that's how you end up in San Francisco, lying on the floor of an Irish dinner hall, getting your leg put back in place by a stranger because my coach forgot the paperwork. So make sure you have all your, I mean, it's so funny now, and it's one of my favorite stories, but you have to have your ducks in a row. Like, have your paperwork. You might think, oh, it's no big deal. Get someone to send it to you. Like, you got to make sure you have that legal side covered, because whether you go to tournaments or not, you really got to make sure you have all checks and done, because as teacher, you are first thrown under the bus if something goes wrong, hopefully metaphorically.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Brian's comment on that too, like with Ubers and ground transportation, all of that. Absolutely.
One thing too, I throw in there that, I don't know if it's still tethered to NSDA membership, but having like your NFHS coaches insurance is like also a good thing, just to protect you kind of against these like third party actions that get taken against you. Like someone says something happened at an event, or someone says something did this wrong, and people want to take out some type of civil penalty against you, or take you to court for whatever reason because you cost them money, or whatever the case may be. The insurance is like pretty broad in terms of like its protection against coaches and those. I think it's just good to have in times of the side thing, and McKendra just put it in there. So I think that's just like a good additional thing to do. But I agree with everything Cameron just said about making sure ground transportation. I found have been the biggest thing, with especially after the pandemic. So many things have changed in terms of like what you can and can't use, stuff like that.
Cameron had to leave early. He had a second option to go to. So thank you. Yeah. Justin, anything from you too with traveling? I know you travel lots with your team too.
Yeah, so I definitely have been down the rabbit hole of the travel thing. Like I've been like on the deep webs talking about like, is Tuesday the best option to buy tickets? I have felt that. I've been on there like Tuesday morning buying my tickets. The kids know how stressful it is, and I think the biggest thing for me is to prioritize safety. Especially when traveling with other people's children. And so I am a pretty cheap person and frugal when it comes to managing the budget for the team. But I'm not going to do like the flight that gets in at 1 a.m. Because that just gives me an anxiety attack about what the hell is going to happen when I arrive there with 20 kids, right? And so that, like, the indoor hallways thing, like Kendra was saying, like, looking at prioritizing safety is a real big thing. Or even transportation. Like, I don't want them riding in cars with strangers and like Ubers and Lyfts and things like that. Like, most places, most states, it's illegal to transport children in 12-passenger vans. Like, and so like Cameron was talking about, knowing the rules is also important, not only for our school district, but also just like in the places that we're traveling. And so prioritizing safety, I think, as like a separate thing that maybe I haven't heard quite as much of yet, would be like my big priority. Free breakfast. Always finding fun with free breakfast. Knowing the cancellation policies for everything and finding flexible cancellation policies. I think that's really important working with children. It's so unpredictable that knowing whenever you're doing a booking, is having flexible cancellation policies. Like the Marriott can do cancellation up to 24 hours in advance and you get your full refund. So that's really, really helpful of knowing those things, I think. But yeah, nothing much more, I guess, to add.
I have to tell you, like, I've been coaching for a long time. These wrinkles are real. And I think I've learned something from every one of you speaking this evening about ways to do life better when it comes to travel. So thank you. I guess I just have one more question, and this is an internal team question. That's, how do you decide who goes to a tournament? Is it everybody goes? I heard Cameron make the statement that if everybody can't go, then nobody goes. Is there like a hierarchy? Is there a competition selection? Darwin, we see who falls off the step when they walk. Like, what is your theory? Or does it matter?
I am not one of the, like, I'll give my first answer. I've prioritized, sometimes if it's a really hard tournament, it's only open to varsity kids. So like, I'm not going to send my novice to Glenbrooks. Like if kind of what the level of competition is at the tournament, I think that can kind of help. I had a kid who just won the TOC. So like knowing which tournaments they needed to go to in order to be successful was like a place where it's like, this needed to go on the schedule because like some schools require you can't be an independent entry. So like I needed to put Glenbrooks on our team schedule, even though I knew it was like 3 kids going because Glenbrooks doesn't take independent entries. Same thing with like Green Hill or other tournaments. If your student is doing school things and other things, like knowing where you need to be the adult and where the kid can be an independent person is a good thing to know. And like I have to prioritize that on my schedule. I also prioritize seniority sometimes for my kids. My kids pay for their travel because it's an independent school. So I don't want to necessarily take a large group if we're going to say Harvard for Worlds or something like that. So it might become like juniors and seniors only with maybe like a couple of sophomores depending on their capacity. But I so far my schedule has not had too many out of state tournaments. I probably have to go to some this year, so that'll be my new first time since the pandemic.
Well, now you know all the tips to do it. Justin and Brian.
Sorry, Brian, did you want to say go first? Okay. I think there's a number of reasons that things that factor into it. And being a class, I have a tournament requirement for my class, and so students have to attend a minimum amount of tournaments each semester that factor into a portion of their grade. And so it's like a free for all for like our league tournaments, right? Like any locals, any one day, anything that's like within driving distance, anybody can go to. So we'll figure out a way to get there, the number of kids that sign up. With that said, no one's going if they're unprepared. And I think that just comes with holding high standards as a coach. If you want to be a competitive program, you want to make sure that the students representing themselves the best way, but they're also representing your program and you as an educator in the best way. And it doesn't teach them anything to just allow them to go to check it off the list. Like, okay, I attended something, but they sat in the back of a Congress round and slept the whole time, right? So yeah, no one's going if they're unprepared. Now, when it comes down to like the tournaments where you're traveling out of state and you're whatever, like you only have about a certain amount of seats in a car based on the number of chaperones that are available to go, and so you do have to narrow it down. And it's really about which kids are you're investing in. And I think as a coach, we do have to make those really difficult decisions. And I like to try my best to look at it from an equity lens as well, making those decisions and trying not to be as biased as possible when it comes to, it's not just the top kids that get to go to everything, right? It's not just the top performing kids. I'm not just taking South Asian and East Asian students to every tournament because that's what tournaments are becoming nowadays, right? Here in California. It's that I'm trying to look at the full picture, right? So it's not just who won first place last time, but it's also like who's a good person, like who is contributing to the team in a positive way. I see them helping out with other students. I see them working really hard, and they have a really a good work ethic, right? Academics also play into my decision as well. Like they're a student before they're a competitor oftentimes, and I don't want that to get in the way. I also don't want parents to be mad at me. So I do have like a minimum GPA of their progress report that they need to meet if they want to attend. So they can't be failing with any Fs in any of their classes. And they have to have that minimum GPA. And if they don't, we give them tutoring until they are able to get to that level. So we don't just say like, oh, sorry, you suck. You don't have enough good grades. You can't go anywhere. No, it's like, okay, I want you to go. I'm willing to invest in you, but you have to invest in your grades and yourself and your academics first before you're able to go. And so try our best to be as unbiased as possible when you're doing the selection process, especially for invitationals. Of course, you also have to think competitively when it comes to postseason competition, like a state or a nationals. At that point, you've been through the whole season, who your kids who have done the best, and that's who you're going to field. And that makes sense. And I don't think anybody can fault anybody for that. But, I like to try to take as much of a diverse group as possible.
So adding on top of that, I definitely agree with a lot of what Justin said. I think, coming from the perspective of when I was at Edgemont, full service debate versus just full service speech and debate, I understand how it's not possible to take everyone. But one thing I think we have to think about as coaches, as we emerge from the pandemic, is just kind of like, what does the quality of life as a coach look like? How do we like stay in the activity for longer? Because like I said, I'm sure everyone on this call agrees, depending on what your program looks like, but 20, 30, 40 weekends a year is just like hard in a 52-week season. It's just, there's, for 20 years of my life, I gave up like every special occasion possible for someone else in my life to go to debate. I feel like the summers and then every other weekend of the year. And I just think like we have to think about it as coaches. What does that quality of life look like? Which means trying to maximize how many students you get to a tournament. And that might mean more regionalization of the way your programs operate instead of flying across the country, like going to the local, in the Bay Area, you can have an entire nationally elite schedule competing, just going to tournaments in the Bay Area. You don't have to leave Southern California the same way. There's a lot of different elements to what's going on down there. Now, and as a result, I think they should look to be like, how many can you take? Now I understand you go to some tournaments, it's hard. Like if James Logan goes to a local tournament, I'm sure it's hard. And Justin's probably run into this where it's like they make up an entire division. So it's just like, that's not an opportunity for them. And I think, but the thing is, I think having James Logan, having programs like that, I'm just using James Logan as one example, but having the local programs continuously, the most successful ones, promote the regional tournaments is what is going to regrow regional debate. The reason that they're the only ones there now is because like everyone has left. There's been a flee from regional events, local regional events. And I think that will help. I think knowing that you get like 15 or 16 fruitful experiences for 95% of your team within driving distance, or even if it's overnight because you're flying to Southern California, Northern California, is way better than 35 weekends trying to split it up, getting to where you need to be. And I think we have to start thinking through that, because once these end of the year competitions comes, it's like February ends and then March through June is like nonstop grind of like national competition every weekend. And then, which is, and I will say, just to like talk about like the Stanford Invitational, I'm sure a lot of people in California are wondering like, why did you go online? One of the reasons we went online was because of the like run of end of mid-January to end of February tournaments in California across the country. If you're a debate program in California, you have the Golden Desert Tournament at the end. If you're like a nationally prominent program that might go to the Emory tournament, you have Emory, Golden Desert, then you have the Stanford tournament, then you have Cal, then you had like the USC tournament, which like popped up again at the end of February. And we just thought like in the mix of that, it's like tough to be a program from Southern California who flies up like to go to the Stanford tournament and then flies home and then flies back up to go to the Cal tournament. So because of some space issues on campus and the idea that like, it's just a really big grind to expect people to like have to pick and choose every weekend, we just were like, it might not be the worst thing for some parts of the country to have like an online experience in the midst of 6 in-person tournaments, because it's just hard to go to them every weekend. I mean, it's just, we've gotten a little bit used to being at home. And I think like that makes a decision of like how to get places. It's like going every weekend and giving up your time with your pet, or your family, or your house, or your roommates, or your whatever. It just, I mean, we got to cherish the moments we have. We never thought we were going to see the pandemic happen in 2020. And I don't think we all thought, we took it for granted that like they'll always be there later. And I think a lot of people aren't there anymore. And we've like relearned that like we got to cherish those moments. So that's just my rant to coaches, to be like, I think we have to think about it. And I'm like the worst offender of this. So like I say it from like a part that like I was on the road for like 35 or 40 weekends a year, plus summer camp, where like only holidays are the only time I had off. And most of the time I was doing tournament prep for another tournament coming up. So I get it. So I'm not like saying to someone who's only gone to 10 tournaments, but I think it's something to consider when you're put together the scope of your team, where you want to travel to, and how you take kids to those events. On top of everything Justin already said, I think it's like important to try to like remember that we have to look out for ourselves as well, because when all these kids graduate from the program, only like 10% of them are coming back to remember like what happened to us. And like none of the administrators really, in a lot of our programs, they're not thinking about like us, and they probably wouldn't care if like the program did cut back some of their travel. So you're not fighting against inertia in a lot of those regards. So I just think we should put that as a forefront and be something that goes into the decision-making practices as coaches going forward, that like our longevity in the activity also matters as much as what this kid's experience is. Because like, if everyone on this call is like no longer teaching debate 5 years from now, it is like a net negative to the debate community, speech and debate community, but if you're teaching for 25 years and 30 years from now, that's great, because you've made it, it's a livable experience for you. And that's as important to the kids than like, because this doesn't matter if we have to have the same conversation with a whole different set of panelists 5 years from now, because none of us are still in the activity because debate burned us out. So that's just my long-winded rant of like going into like who goes to tournaments. It also matters like what do we want our tournament schedule to look like for us to stay in the activity.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I was gonna say the kids do the same thing. I had thought my kids had my schedule looks like a lot of Southern California invitationals just because it's easier for my kids to get to. I thought, hey, they're back in person. They're gonna want to go to Damus in Sherman Oaks 3 days before the tournament. They're like, we see that this division is hybrid. Can we stay home? And I'm like, all right, sure. Like I can email the tournament director and ask. And a couple of kids are asking like, are these tournaments in person? Are they online? So like the kids are, I think, having an adjustment, and I think that also needs to be something we all take into account. I have online tournaments on my schedule for that reason exactly, because I know some of them don't want to travel. Some of them like debating online still. It's their comfort, and they don't want to push themselves out of that comfort of like, what does it mean to go to an in-person tournament yet? So I think we have to kind of think about that too a little bit.
I would agree. And I'd listen to your TED Talk any day, Brian. You're welcome to have those. Your rant is really poignant. And I think it is necessary for us to examine what we do and why we do it in every realm. I don't want to take the rest of your lives, although I could listen to you for forever because you are so wise and so seasoned and so very capable. I would love to take just a moment, however, for you to pitch your tournaments. I think that's another reason why we're here, is to really talk about the value. And I love the Stanford tournament. I love MLK. I love the La Costa Canyon. I'm a groupie. I'll just admit it. But if y'all would take a moment to talk about your tournaments, that would be fantastic.
Go ahead, Justin. You can go first.
Cool. So yeah, so we are in the Bay Area, and we are hosting all 17 of the CHASA events offered at CHASA. I think one thing that's really great about our tournament in January is that, one, it's the first, I think, varsity only invitational of the season. And so we try to have the caliber of competition to be similar to what you may see at CHASA State Tournament or at some of the national circuit tournaments across the country. And so what's great about our tournament is that you can double enter, cross enter in both speech and debate. And so that's not something that's necessarily offered at every invitational anymore. And I think that's a huge reason why people might want to come, is that you can try both out at one tournament. We also offer TOC bids in all of our speech national events, as well as public forum and Congress. And so we're really happy to be able to offer those. And it's in January, MLK weekend. And it's the Bay Area, so it's not that cold. It's just a little cold.
It has the best food shops around the corner. Not just saying I'm a fat kid, but I love it. Go ahead, Brian. Talk to us too.
So the Stanford Invitational for 2023, it's going to be an all online experience. I know it's, a little bit of something for everybody, but we offer middle school, novice, JV, and varsity competition. As a result, that was not something we were ever able to offer in person. We were only able to offer JV and varsity competition. So like being able to provide middle school opportunities, and also being able to separate your novice from your JV students, I think helps a lot when it's like first year versus those second years. It's a big jump for kids. So I think we're offering everything. We offer all the debate events. We're offering parliamentary debate. We offer all the speech events. We have TOC qualifiers and all of our events for the Lexington TOC. And, we're going to do our best to provide a high quality event online. We try to get very good staff to work it as a result of it. And, we try to have a manageable schedule for online to kind of balance the East Coast and the West Coast. So, you're done by 5 or 6 o'clock on a daily basis. You have single flighted debates instead of the double flighted debates. We're going to offer 4 rounds of speech rather than just the 3 rounds of speech. And hopefully that offers, the same thing with Congress, 4 sessions of Congress rather than 3, and it'll offer you a little bit better experience. That maybe you've had in the past at the Stanford tournament because of the way the lighting has to happen, or your speech students at the hotel, et cetera. So we're going to try it out for 2023, see how people like it, do some surveying at the end of it to see kind of how that experience helped with the mix of your like January, February schedules as coaches, especially the Bay Area and Southern California coaches. But in addition to that, I also, with my work with Kentucky, we're offering a whole set of digital series tournaments online. So the first weekend of December, the third weekend of February, and the second weekend of March, we're offering what they call the digital speech and debate series. This was offered through some grant that we got from an alumnus at the University of Kentucky. We're providing $25 an entry, very low entry fees to get in. It's going to be hosted at NSDA campus. We're offering, again, middle school, novice, varsity level competition, middle school and high school level speech events, and kind of everything under the sun. So spread the word. Feel free to email me with any questions. If any of the coaches have, if you talk to anybody who asked, what are these, feel free to forward them to me, or you can answer yourself. But there will be TOC bids attached to most of the events. The later ones in February and March will have quarterfinals bids attached to debate, finals bid in Congress, speech bids, always dependent on entries, but we hope that it provides some opportunities to students at the end of the year. Maybe if you weren't able to get to an earlier year, or who knows what the winter brings. In California, it's not as big a deal, but in the Northeast and the East Coast, it's hectic when the winter comes. So who knows what kind of opportunities are going to be taken away from our students moving forward because of flights or travel, transportation issues, or sickness, or whatever. So we hope these digital tournaments are going to offer a little bit of an additional bonus for those students that might have their plans kind of disrupted for any number of reasons, even academically, that allow them some late season opportunities to kind of get them on the right path if they're looking for TOC competition or TOC championship.
That is awesome. That's really cool. I'm excited about that. Y'all have been fantastic. Like I said, I could listen to you for forever, but I will give you your evening back. Thank you for taking the time to be with us, and thanks for all that you shared. It was really insightful and really helpful. So thank you so much for joining us for the Coaches Corner. For everybody else who's here, thank you as well. And if there's time for Q&A or you want to hang out, we'll be here. If you need to dip out, I totally get it. I'll just stop the recording now.